We are 1 week out from the NBA draft, one of my favorite times of year, and a guy I love talking to from The Athletic. He is great on the draft. All of his stuff is up right now. It's Sam Vecenie. What's up, man? Good to see you.
Ryan, it's so good to see you this time of year, man. I'm so happy that we're doing this. I mean, how do you feel about this 2-day draft? That's where I'm at. Like, this feels like insane to me that we're doing this on 2 days.
Yeah, I blame the NFL. I blame the NFL for a lot of the programming choices that we have where you're just like, hey, is there any way to get some kind of live audience number on another night? And look, I get it. It's business, maximizing all of your potential income earning possibilities, but it's just, I don't know. If there was ever a year to not have to do it, it would be this year with this class. So let's start at the top. I really want to focus on the lottery. You have a mock-up, and I was going through it this morning. And so I've even touched on this with Bill going back a couple of weeks ago, where it felt like teams were just hinting at, and it's easy when you don't have the pickup there, but hinting at like, hey, a lot of teams have very different orders of who like 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 are. I'd imagine you've heard a lot of the same thing, which again, to emphasize, it is also very easy to say you would do something different when you have nothing to do with a pick in that range.
Yes, that is accurate. Look,
Okay.
So the mock you probably looked at, I would imagine is from like early June, right? So I just literally an hour before we started recording this, like updated and like finalized a mock and sent it off, right? So we'll kind of talk through this live. So I don't know about you, but like the name that I continue to get like most connected with Atlanta is Donovan Clingan. Like I don't know if you're getting that as well. I'm not saying that that's exactly what happens. I'm not even saying Donovan Clingan goes number one, but the name I get most connected with Atlanta right now seems to be Donovan at this point.
Okay. Clingan has been somebody I would say weeks leading up to this where it's like, hey, this team would like Clingan. This team would like to move up. This team would like, and then it was kind of getting like, I don't know how high you're going to have to go up for him. And then you have to have the internal debate of like, well, is Clingan worth the number one pick? But this year, like as I'm watching Sarr and Risachet, I'm just like, okay, well, in this year, these guys are part of that conversation, depending on how you feel about it. So I know you've done, I think you had a note, you do different tiers for just ranking the prospects historically. What was different about this year at the top of the class?
Sure. So I always rank out tiers in terms of not by year. Like I don't have Alex Sarr, who is my number one player, as a tier 1 player this year, right? I don't have any tier 1 or tier 2 players in this class. That is very abnormal for me. I am not stingy with those grades. Like over the last 4 years, I think I've had 16 of those guys. And the way that I consider, these tiers are tier 1, like very high degree of likelihood this person is an all NBA player. Tier 2, like very high degree of likelihood this person is an all-star. And then like tier 3 is, okay, there's some all-star upside here. Like I can see a world where Donovan Clingan makes a Jarrett Allen-y all-star game, right? But I can't, I can't sit here and tell you that I think Donovan Clingan is going to be an all-star either. You know what I mean? Like I think he's going to be a good starting center in the NBA that plays elite level drop coverage and screens at an elite level and does all of those things well, right? Like I don't think he's going to average 20 points a game. So I look at this class and I think that it is entirely an eye of the beholder draft. And it's almost not dependent on how you evaluate player. It's almost more dependent upon how you see the league like moving forward. And how you see like the shape of the league. Like for instance, we just watched Boston put Jason Tatum on Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively for minutes on end, right? Well, like would Boston just be able to do that with Donovan Clingan, or would Clingan be able to like kind of manhandle him in the post potentially? I don't know. Like teams have different opinions on that, but ultimately where you're going to fall on Donovan Clingan, I think is going to be dependent more on like what your philosophy of like modern basketball is. And if you think that, you need a 5-out look to be able to be successful in the NBA, and where you fall on Alex Sarr is how much potential you think he has to actually be a real 5-out center as opposed to a theoretical one down the road.
Yeah, the Clingan conversation, like we all saw all the great parts of it, whether it's the drop coverage that you mentioned, the help defense where he just swallows it up. Illinois trying to attack him, thinking they were going to like expose him a bit or get him into foul trouble. You're like, nope, this isn't going to work.
No.
But then I think all of us that love basketball love how UConn plays out every second of every shot clock. Not that they're running the clock down, but that when the first thing is cut off, they'll keep running their offense. And Klingon became a part of that. Like I like that Hurley. I think it's a very simple approach to basketball. It's like let everybody touch the basketball because then everyone's going to be more engaged throughout the entire game. And I think Klingon had some moments where you go, okay, you may be able to throw it down at him and then he'll make some sort of read. But it's kind of like the Edey conversation. You can love him in the post, but who's actually doing that? So when you look at Klingon's offense, you're never going to be looking at him as like a primary option unless you get some kind of small mismatch that you were alluding to there with Tatum. And then the shooting history, I think we all want all these big guys to be able to space the floor. It's a bit like the football evaluation where you'd hear some coaches say, don't tell me all the things he can't do. Tell me the things that he can do. And the things that Klingon can do are really good. But I think we get greedy with bigs now where you're like, oh, he doesn't make his free throws. The 3-point shooting isn't a threat whatsoever. So what am I drafting here? Am I drafting a help side drop coverage center number one overall? Where if you're watching Sarr, you could probably, if you were in a good mood that day, talk yourself into what the best version of him is offensively, knowing that the shot part of it, the pull up, the spot up stuff, is far more developed than anything because Klingon doesn't even have to do any of those things. So it's just two different players.
Yeah, like Donovan Klingon is a better basketball player right now than Alex Sarr by like a fairly real margin. I think like I watched Alex here in Australia for, all season this year. Donovan Klingon would like dominate this league in a real way. Alex Sarr came off the bench in this league and was effective when he came off the bench, but he came off the bench in this league. Now, it's exactly what you're saying in terms of Alex Sarr. And again, this is where we get into like that modern basketball discussion. Like Alex Sarr, for the most part this year, was like a pick and pop big and like a pick and short roll big. Like he slipped all of his screens. Like I don't think he's a particularly good screener yet, right? He's more of a perimeter player, but man, like when you watch the flashes of him putting the ball on the deck and you watch him shoot the basketball, yeah, he shot like 29%, but he clearly has like pretty real touch and like the ball comes out of his hand softly. That's what makes it all theoretical with Alex Sarr. But if you think about basketball kind of the way that I think about basketball now, especially in light of the Celtics winning the NBA title, I think that every team in the NBA from now on, like to win a title, is going to have some sort of 5-out look. It doesn't have to be necessarily your bread and butter necessarily, but I think that they have to at least have it as a counter to what defenses are going to present, because otherwise it's just going to be too hard to score. I think given how good coaches are now at scheming against that. So when I look at Alex Sarr, I just see him as the big in this class that has a chance to actually be like a dribble pass shoot big who covers an immense amount of space on the court in help side coverage, who, is an elite level shot blocker. Like, I just think he brings more in like a modern basketball sense to me, even if he's worse at basketball than Donovan Klingon does. And that's where the projection side of it comes in.
Yeah, he had to play against the Hawks. There was a block shot, so it kind of leads to like a turnover. And he gathers the ball at like the opposite free throw line and he brings it up. He crosses over a defender in transition. I'm not saying it was like Iverson, but for somebody his size to do that. But then he gets into the paint, he kind of hits this and one floater. And when I watch him, and granted, James Wiseman is going to haunt me for the rest of my life. But when Wiseman didn't think about what he was doing and his natural athleticism took over in the very limited amount of games that we had from him, you could see the special qualities of projecting of what he could be. But once Wiseman had to think, you could see it was like a bad internet connection of just slowly going like, oh, and then you're like, hey man, the whatever you were contemplating, now everything's over and now you're kind of stuck. Even though you have this amazing frame and athleticism and this really soft touch, like I could see with Wiseman, okay, the bust version of him is this, but the high side version of him is of all these things. Even with Sarr, who for his size looks like this 7-foot wing, and this is again being greedy, the flashiness is really cool, but you could tell it's still just not fluid. Like this is not some fluid 7-footer who you're like, oh, I'm going to be able to do all these incredible things with him. I think the pick and pop part of it is probably the most bankable thing right now.
Yeah, like the level to which Chet Holmgren is ahead of him and like
Yeah.
was ahead of him at Gonzaga is like staggering. Like I don't even think it's remotely close. Like Chet was leaps and bounds ahead as a shooter. I thought he was better as a driver and as a ball handler. He played with better bend. I felt like with Alex, there are moments where like he'll try and like jab step, like crossover in the mid range and get creative. And like, I kind of love seeing the creativity with him, but it's just like not, like you said, like it's not fluid yet. It's not there. Like he got called for like 3 or 4 travels doing the same move this year and like, just failing on some level. So I agree. Like, I think that another thing that makes it difficult with him is, watching him on a less condensed court, or a more condensed court, I'm sorry, than like some of the G League guys. Like we actually got like a really cool opportunity to see him play the G League Ignite earlier this year. And, we can talk about like what it actually meant being a better prospect than Ron Holland and Modest Buzelis. But he was very clearly the best player on the court in those games. And having that extra space, having that like little extra driving lane, we actually saw him like short roll to pass a little bit more in those 2 games than I think I saw him do all year in Perth. So these guys that are so big and so skilled, like I do think that the space matters, but you really need him to fill out physically to be able to play the 5 too. He really is just truly like an eye of the beholder player. And like, if you want to buy into development, like I do, I buy into him and I kind of buy into the person. Like he's like a super mature kid, like all the intel like checks out at a really high level, but it's a hard conversation if you're a team like Atlanta who thinks, hey, we were just the 10th overall pick and we got lucky and jumped up to number 1. We might not be that far away. Maybe let's just go get the guy that's good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it feels like if he goes 1, I'll sit there and go like, all right, yeah, like I totally get it. And
Yeah.
teams will tell you that they may have a guy graded a little bit higher, but it's so hard to add that elite level talent. And be like, what if this guy actually works out? Or like some GMs know they're making the mistake while they're making the mistake, but the rationale is just you go, okay, this is somebody that at least though, if it were to work out, like we know what the high side of him is, and ultimately getting back to that word of upside. Where's
and
the rest
let me be clear on Atlanta too. Like they're having like Zach Risachet in for a workout this week, right? Like this could all of this could change. Like they might end up just like taking Risachet and things are fine. But again, like people around the league like seem to think they like Klingon in some way, and maybe they'll try and trade down, maybe they'll try and just take him at 1. But I don't know what they're going to do yet. That's what makes this fun.
Okay, let's talk Risachet then.
Okay, so what are your thoughts? Because I'm curious. I'm always very curious to see what people think the first time they watch him. Because I'll give you mine real quick. I watched him last year at Hoop Summit and thought he was like terrible.
Okay.
Like point blank. I thought he was really bad, but he couldn't shoot then. And he shot this like weird, like flat trajectory shot and looked terrible. But then this year he comes out and shoots 45% for the first like 4 months of the year, and then shoots 22% from 3 for the next 3 months, and then has this like unbelievable stretch to finish the season. Like I'm curious. Like I really want to know what you think of him.
He doesn't suck at all. I think that would be
Yeah,
missing the mark on him.
he doesn't. I agree.
No. And I like the shot that I saw in the Euro stuff. The way he's like ready to go off of the catch. He does a really good job, like up fake and resetting himself. Now, some guys, like I've mentioned this with Drew Holiday, like if Drew Holiday gets an open catch in the corner, he actually wants to get a dribble down to be able to reset himself. And sometimes I actually think it's a harder shot for him. But Zach is so big, it's not the same challenge on the reset after the up fake. And so when I'm watching him, I think a lot of these guys, like I'll go, okay, let's watch him as if he's bad, and let's watch him as if he's good. Like I'll try to do that with different players.
Yeah.
If you think he's bad, you'll be like, okay, so this guy's got all this size, and somebody like this that's potentially in the the conversation for the number one pick. Like, I got to see more ball creation, and he's a spot up guy this past season on 40% of his possessions. And it's a lot of catch and shoot. So like, so what am I drafting? Am I drafting a guy who's just anchored to the corner and he hits enough threes that he's providing spacing? But like, can I take somebody like that number one? But I think when I watch him, when I'm like, okay, he is good because he is really athletic. He's obviously, maybe I shouldn't say really athletic because it's not. Whenever I think like really athletic, I always think of like a Westbrook, and I'm not trying to sell you on that. But he moves really well for his size. I think he goes up into traffic really well for rebounds, and then some shot contests that show like an aggression with him that maybe people wouldn't see right away because there's not much definition in his body. He obviously needs to get stronger and all those different things. The problem that I have is like there's some glimpses at times of him wanting to do something with the ball, but for the most part, like he doesn't seem like he's doing much on ball creation at all. And then there's stuff in transition where it looks like he has the physical advantage as somebody's trying to meet him at the rim, and then he doesn't finish a lot. So I was like, what the fuck is going on with that? Like, you're huge. Like, get up there and finish this on him. So like a lot of these guys, there's some things I really like. I do like the shooting, despite the up and down nature of it, because I just think I think he's a very confident shooter. I don't think he's necessarily taking awful shots, by the way, too. Like, I think with the young players, there's shot selection stuff. I'm like, what are you doing? I always think of Jaden Hardy in the G League, where it was some of the worst shot selection I've seen of anyone I've ever evaluated.
Don't think about that anymore, Ryan. Like, maybe don't.
I'll tell you what, though, it actually translates in a good way in the NBA because when he checks into a game, my man is not afraid. So yeah, that's my Zach breakdown. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think any of that's wrong, but like what you just described to me, and look, I say this is somebody like I have Russillo in the top 5, and I have him in this top group of players, but like what you just described to me is like the Nick Batum that we saw this year for the 76ers, who's like 39 years old, right?
He moves better, I think, than Batum does. Would you agree? Would you give me that?
Yeah, he does. Like, but he doesn't move like Batum did when he was younger either. You know what I mean? Like, Nick was a freak athlete who was like in a dunk contest and like could really go and like doesn't pass like Nick does or did either, like in Charlotte and places like that. So, I go so back and forth with him. Like, there are times where I think he is such an awesome like third or fourth player to have out there just because of that shooting. I think he's really sharp in terms of help side defense too. Like, I think that you kind of look at the way he takes up space on that weak side, plays 1-on-2 really well. Like, those are very real NBA style situations where he'll be tasked with, responsibilities like that and be successful at them. But man, like I would just feel bad drafting a player where like I don't feel like there's a lot of on-ball upside or like a lot of on-ball juice. Cause like
the on-ball part of it is the thing that gets in the way of like being excited about him. I completely agree. So keep going.
Yeah. Like with him, like it's just like Franz Wagner was so far ahead of him in terms of like flexibility and like bend out of ball screens at Michigan. Right. Like, and like, I guess that like Russillo doesn't run a lot of ball screens, but like even in transition, right, you'll see him like just get out of control in like a weird way too, where I don't know, like I think he's going to be a good NBA player. Like, I think he's definitely going to be a guy that you can have out there as your fourth or fifth option who's going to knock down corner threes. But I just like wouldn't love taking that guy at like 2 or 1 or like even 3 really.
Yeah, I'd love him at 9. Whenever I watch him, I'm like, man, if he was going 9th, I'd be like, hey, nice work here. But when you look at some of the pick and roll ball handling stuff, they barely did any of that with him. I think it's only 4% of his possessions. The numbers clearly aren't going to be very good because he wasn't really comfortable because they never really let him do it. But he's not a jerk of a player. Like, he's very good with like knowing when he's supposed to be spacing. And then there would be stretches where I'm like, is he doing anything? And then he actually showed some good instincts of like what they were doing in their half court sets of getting involved. And I love young players like setting a back screen that's not in the play to be like, hey, this guy's not paying attention. So there was some awareness stuff with him that I went, okay, these are all like really good signs. But I think we're we're on the same page here. So let me ask you this, because if Buzelis could shoot threes with his on ball stuff, that is the opposite. Like when you get the right stretch of Buzelis, it's really impressive. But he
Yeah.
hasn't had any history of hitting shots. Would you think he would go one if he was like 36% from three?
I think he probably would, but like I don't love the shot, and I'm like a little bit lower on the on ball stuff than other people. I get it. Like I'm, if you think there's like on ball juice there, like we've seen it in transition particularly, and one of my personal like flaws as an evaluator, right? Like I'm cognizant enough to like understand it on some level, is that I struggle at times with these like bigger dudes who tend not to have a lot of space to create, but like have shown latent ball handling ability in the past. Like I struggled with like Scotty Barnes, right? Scotty was like weird and stiff and like still is like kind of weird and stiff bizarrely, but it works on some level because he's so big and he covers so much ground so quickly, right?
He was also
With
like
Bazel-
incredibly advanced of like, it didn't make any sense because it was funny. We were talking about it and he popped into my head for a different reason, but his awareness of what they were supposed to be doing as the freshman, I
yeah.
went, oh my God. So yeah, back to your point though.
Well, and like Scotty as well was like this amazing passer, kind of like what you're saying here. Like he could run point guard for them. Like I don't think Modest can really do any of that. Like I've never really seen Modest as like a passer or a playmaker, even at lower levels. It's been a lot of like, I'm getting up and down in transition. I'm going to try and dunk on people's faces. Like I'm going to, have these creative finishing packages whenever I have some space to go. And that stuff like can translate once you get wider driving lanes. But look, this Ignite team was like a catastrophe and we can just like admit it and call it out for what it was. But they did play on like an NBA spaced court, even if they were like the worst shooting team in that league this year. So I go back and forth on Modest. I do. Like I ended up with him outside of the top 10 because like I just don't know like what it exactly is. But like I think there are like floor outcomes for him that are pretty rough at the end of the day.
Yeah, the numbers would back you up because the ISO stuff is good. The pick and roll ball handler stuff isn't good. But when I look at some of these big guys where I go, what are you doing on those drives? With Modest, there's no hesitation. Like the aggressiveness from him is something that I really appreciated. And I felt like he was just entirely like engaged the entire time, where some of these other guys are still overwhelmed by everything and float a little bit too much. So I know teams have basically written him off because of the shooting. And I'm not even talking about the teams they're drafting, but like when they're ranking him, I think more people agree with you on the downside of it, but I can't help. It's like, again, if you're projecting, you're going, holy shit, can this guy handle at 6'10"? And he's like a real athlete, but then he'll have a tendency too, where a lot of these younger players too, I'll be like, do you even have any idea what you're doing on your drive? Or are you just kind of doing it because you have the ball right now? And he'll get a little like Dirkish where he'll back you down and fall in love with this kind of like 1 foot turnaround stuff. And it's like, hey, that's a really difficult shot. You may not want to keep going to that unless it's going down, but
maybe
there's no hesitate. Right. Yeah. Right. But with him, like the fluidity stuff that we're talking about, he's fluid. There's no hesitation. He's really aggressive. He legit can handle for that size in comparison to some of these other guys. But the shooting thing definitely hurts the stock. All right. So who else do you like?
Well, to your point on Modest too, like I'll say, like the intel's super positive. Like everything I've gotten on Modest is like work ethic is incredible. Like, he looks skinny right now, but like really has like tried to embrace getting in the gym. Right. And like he looked so much bigger at the combine comparatively to what he looked like even during the G League season. So to your point, like I think that there is real reason to believe in that as a real potential like growth outcome. People like buy him as a human.
Well, that's great to know that as a human, because you never know, right?
Like it's not always there.
There's so few guys though that you'll hear about and be like disaster. You just don't hear it as much as you used to. So I don't know if these younger guys, like maybe we should give them all a little bit more credit, because I feel like when I first started doing this, I'd be like, did you hear about this guy, or like what's going on with this or whatever? And there's always like,
I remember you got all the shit for Nerlens Noel, right?
Yeah,
like
I got a ton.
That was fun.
Yeah. No, it ended up on the front page USA Today. And then the funny thing is then I think his agent said something like, oh, he just believed another agent and he got worked. And I was like, no, that's not what happened. But sometimes, in fairness to Nerlens, it was more about what was around him that people were freaked out
Yeah.
by. And look, there's another player that was recently drafted really high. I heard the exact same thing and has not been an issue. And this player is awesome. So,
Yeah.
but I'm not going to name him. I did a big Reed Shepherd thing with Bill on Sunday because the shooting numbers, I don't think it's even close to like hyperbole to say he's one of the best shooters I've ever seen coming into the draft. Every single number, you'd go, wait, what is he on catch and shoot? Wait, what is he on unguarded? Wait, guarded, he's at like 99th percentile. Like, every single number is like the best number you could possibly have. But he's 6'1.5". And I, as we're going through all these guys, I'm like, man, I would be so scared to be Atlanta because you're likely just going to get it wrong. And then, of course, one of these guys that we don't like is going to end up being the best player of this draft. And he's going to go 8th. And everybody's going to say, you guys didn't see it and all that stuff because that's just the way the draft is. But I just can't fathom, even with the questions that we have about other people and Shepherd translating the gap of like, is he really going to be your point guard or is he going to be coming off the bench, knocking down some shots to give you some spacing?
Yeah. Yeah. I have read it too in this class. I love him. Like I'm in. I feel like bad about it. Let's be clear. Like Reed would not be a top 5 guy like last year at all. But like I on some level, it's just like this guy's really fucking good at basketball, right? Like you just watch him play, and it's just like, oh, holy shit, he's like the best transition passer in the class. Oh, well, he's like the best shooter, I've evaluated in, I don't know, 5 years at least, right? He is like capable of taking ball screens. He has like a real floater game. He's unbelievable. Like the thing that we haven't seen him do a lot of is like coming off of screens and shooting, right? Because Kentucky did that with like Antonio Reeves all year, really. And that was really the only guy that they had like run those actions. But I don't know. I feel pretty good about him coming off screens, probably given the shot, right? So there's just like a lot of ways that his game translates to the NBA. And when you can shoot from 32 feet away from the rim, I almost think that like Tyrese Halliburton here is like somewhat instructive. It just opens up the floor in so many ways for you to where like you don't need this unbelievable handle where you're, breaking down guys with like 6 crossovers strung together back to back to back, right? You just have to be able to change pace and be able to play off of a live dribble. And I think he can do that to a like real level. The defense is fascinating. Like his defensive tape is like some of the most complicated defensive tape I've ever had to evaluate because he'll make these like unbelievable anticipatory defensive like plays where he'll like come from the weak side and, figure out that the ball is going to the lob man out of ball screens before the lob man like even starts his roll, it feels like, and he'll just be there. But then like, and he blocked 0.7 shots per game as a guy that's 6'1", right? His closeouts are awesome. Like he gets to spots way quicker than what I think people like understand, but then kind of goes like space cadet-y at times off the ball. And then like on the ball, obviously there are real concerns. And he gave up like a ton of straight line drives this year. And like, do you just buy the playmaking and the instincts on some level? I think he's just like a special basketball mind on top of being a special shooter. And I just like always kind of bet on those guys figuring it out. Like, it's almost like he's like a small Derek White to me, kind of but like a better shooter, but like the size off puts it. I don't know. Like, I think he's going to be that level player, I guess, though, is like probably not an all-star, but like somebody that's just really good and really useful to a team winning basketball games.
The transition passing was the thing that like made me look at him at an entirely different level because that will always show me like with a basketball player where you go, okay, you do, just because you have the ball and you're probably the best option crossing half court, like you want to get, that's like a team thing for me. It's really, really important when I see that, especially with a young player, that as soon as he crosses half court, if he gets that high screen and the lower defender isn't there to meet him to contest or whatever, it's a layup for him. Like watching teams lose him as he repositions himself as well, which is another thing I loved about him, where it's kind of that Warriors deal of like, hey, just move a little bit around the perimeter as all this chaos is happening in the paint around the rim. Because if the ball comes loose or somebody's cut off, if you're just moving a little like left to right, you're just going to get a wide open shot. And then you can see the opposing teams in the SEC being like, I can't believe I like lost track of them again. Because Dillingham would run so much of what they were doing on offense too. And then there's the times where I'm like, can you really draft a guy who's like, I can't see him right now. Like he's lost in the trees because he is that small, but he is a really good athlete. And the high side of it is if you could really trust him to kind of run your offense. But I think there's some passing stuff in there, even though he can get a little turnover happy. I don't know if that's not seeing it. I don't know if that's size. Sometimes I think it's just his risk where he'll go, I don't care. Like, let me see if this will work, which sometimes I'd rather see that. I don't want to see it all the time. I'd like you to kind of outgrow it a little bit with a younger player that he's even thinking about some of those passes. Like at this stage, I can go, all right, you know what? Like that's better than never, ever seeing any of this stuff or never even wanting to do it. But you have him too. God, this draft is so weird.
Oh, look, I don't feel, again, like I don't feel great about having him at 2. Yeah. Like I'm somebody that like, I really struggle with guys that are that small. Like I was like losing my mind when Peyton Pritchard was on the court for the Celtics. I was like, okay, he's just like way too small. Like he's just getting attacked every time by Luka. Yeah. So look, Reed is not much bigger than Peyton Pritchard, but he's way better, obviously. But I don't know. It's this draft, man. Like I have Devin Carter at 7. Devin Carter's like 22, man.
Okay. You said you weren't good. Who was it? A Bazelis, those types of players you said you weren't good with. I already know that Devin Carter, like I'm already ready to be wrong about this. And I know he's not as high as some of these other guys that you're talking about. Well, you just had him 7. Give us your Devin Carter sales job.
So like the way that I would explain it is he's the guy. Do you remember hearing last year about like Jaime Jaquez? He'd just like go into workouts and just like kill people. Like every single like workout he went in, he was the best player on the court. It's like that, except like times 2 this year with Devin Carter. He is just like completely like obliterated every workout. I've been told by like multiple teams that he went in there and was like the best workout they've seen since they've like been in place at that job, basically. So he is 6'2" with like a 6'9" wingspan. So like not super big, but super strong. And I think the guys that tend to overplay that height issue tend to be the ones that are like physically strong. Like think like Fred VanVleet, Chris Paul, guys that are like physical and capable of like dealing with contact. Has the length to be able to make up for it. He's also not just like the most explosive athlete in this class. He's like functional in the way he uses it on the court. He is exceptionally quick with his first step as a ball handler. He is exceptionally quick with like his first slide defensively. He blocked like a shot per game this year, mostly on closeouts because he's a 42-inch vertical leap and a 6'9" or 6'9" wingspan. You know, he is so unbelievably vertical at the basket as a dunker, where I think he had like 35 dunks this year at 6'2", with a bunch of those being like half court dunks where he's just like rising up and going. The question that people have is the jumper. I'll just be honest with you. Like I've like met the kid. I've watched him work out. He's going to figure out the jumper. Like that kid's like not going to stop working until he figures out the jumper. And we saw it this year. He made 39% or whatever he did on 7 3-point attempts per game. So I get the concern. Oh, by the way, like half of those 3-point attempts were from 25 feet or beyond. So like already from NBA range, and he made them at 37%. So he has the range already to be able to account for the NBA line, to be able to make up for the space that he's going to give up, and, you know, has the slower release on the jumper. So like it might take him a second, but I just think I think the world of his competitiveness. I think he's an elite level defender. I think he is a guy that will score points in the NBA and be able to pass and play make. I thought his issue this year was that like he overdrove and, you know, kind of got in trouble a little bit because they relied upon him for so much. But yeah, like they just needed him to do everything, it felt like. And man, when I watch him, I think I just think he's a guy that's going to help a lot of teams win basketball games at the end of the day.
So just so people that are listening maybe going like, who are you talking about? Played at Providence, led the Big East in scoring, was the Big East Player of the Year. And as Sam mentions, just a shade over 6'2". He was 3rd in rebounding in the league this year at 9 boards a game. He started at South Carolina. He was kind of between 27-30% from three those first few seasons. And then this year, as you point out, 38%. His dad's Anthony Carter, who played in the league for over a decade. So he's not a point guard, but he was tasked with kind of figuring everything out for Providence. And you said something too that I went ahead and I need to look up what the final number is. Watching his tape, the number of times he's given the ball back at the end of the shot clock to be like, please just save us. Like, I think the shooting numbers are way better with better players because I can't, he may have led the Big East with grenades and how many shots he had to take where you're like, I can't believe you guys just gave me back the basketball. He also he's not Lowry, the point guard, but he already has all the Lowry bullshit down. Not as egregious as Lowry, who again should be banned from the league, but he does things. I'm like, okay, well, no kidding. Like, your dad played in the league this whole time. Yeah. So whether it's the contest at three where he'll get you deep, he'll up fake you. Like, I have respect for up fake and contact around the rim because that's part of the defense. But there's all these other little tricks that this dude has that you go, what is this guy, like 32? But because he's 6'2", I'm like, okay, well, maybe he's not going to rebound that way. But Podziemski's rebounding translated. But again, he's bigger, but not like dramatically bigger. But you get the point.
I don't know if he's functionally bigger. Like,
yeah, with the wingspan part of it, you're probably right.
Yeah. And again, Devin Clark, not Devin Clark, good God. Devin Carter is the best athlete in this draft class. Like, I think point blank. If you look at any of the explosiveness scores at the combine, if you watch like the tape, like he's just a sick athlete. And I think I agree with you. Like, I don't know if he's going to be like a 9 rebound per game guy. I don't think he's going to be like Josh Hart as a rebounder, but man, like, I think he might be like one of the 3 or 4 best rebounding guards in the league.
Yeah, Podziemski's almost 2 inches taller, but his wingspan is 4 inches shorter.
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, so you taken Devin Carter, 7th or 8th. And it's going to take I think it's going to take a while because sometimes he doesn't even look like he's as athletic as he tested. So then when I went back, I watched him, and then I went back and looked at the testing stuff, like even to the Reed Shepherd point. Like, I think Reed was right there among the leaders in vert, but Devin technically had the highest max vert of anybody, right, at the combine?
Yeah, I have some. I don't want to accuse anybody of anything. Anytime that I look at the vert number, I look at the standing reach number and see if it is commensurate with everybody else who is around that person's size. That's how I'll phrase that. Reed Shepherd's 7'9" standing reach when he's the same size as Jared McCain basically gave me some questions. Maybe I don't know if these are unfair. I'm just asking questions. Like, this is the Ringer. This is the Bill Simmons Network. I'm allowed to go conspiracy Bill here for a minute, right?
It's encouraged. All right, let's try to get to some of the other guys because we still haven't hit on everybody. Dalton Connect, another guy who is a real athlete, tested really well on all that stuff. We know the story of how much he grew from high school, JUCO, on and on and on. I know he's older, which is going to scare some teams away. That should not scare you this year. I think he's a pretty easy plug and play guy right away.
Yeah, awesome shooter. Like, he's going to be able to step in and knock down shots immediately. The question is, if you're taking him in the top 10, like, what is the upside, right? I think that the way to like access his upside is to put him in a scheme where you're running all sorts of movement. You're going to run him off of like a bunch of floppy sets. You're going to run him off of like flares, and you're going to get him into the action early, right? To be able to kind of move him around like a chess piece. Like, if I was like kind of dreaming if Miami could like find a way to move up to, 8, 10, wherever Dalton's going to go, and just like somehow get him as an upgraded athlete of like Duncan Robinson, that'd be like pretty sick to me in that offense. But as long as, there's no way he's like a no fail guy because of the shooting. Like, he's just going to knock down shots and he's confident. The defense is a concern. He's not a great defender, but has athletic tools to maybe be able to overcome it at some point. But plug and play, kind of like you said, like, I think he's going to be able to go in and knock down shots, which is incredibly important in today's NBA.
Where are you on Castle?
I would be comfortable taking the bet, maybe is the way to put it. Like, I have him in that top tier of players. I do go like back and forth on, is he 3, is he 4, is he 5, right? I think where I'm at is I would just be comfortable making the bet and seeing if it works. I think if he shoots, he has a chance to be potentially the best player in this class because he's a great defender. He's like a very versatile defender. You can give him a ton of different assignments. Like he chased Baylor Shireman off of screens, in multiple games this year and dealt with Mark Sears at the point of attack defensively in the Final Four, right? Like you can put him on anybody like 1 through 4 and he's going to do a good job. I don't think he's, all defense guy, but he's going to do a good job at least. Showed real ball screen upside, in high school. Showed some upside as a passer this year at Connecticut, 3 assists versus like 1.8 turnovers, something like that. The key really is like, do you think he will ever have shooting gravity? And, I think it just depends on how you evaluate the shot. And, I think he has touch. It's just, I think mechanically it's a little bit messy right now. So I'd feel great if I had a great shooting coach. I would be a little bit more questionable maybe if I didn't.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's like mechanically fluid or anything. I think he's thinking about it a little bit. And that's kind of a perfect transition into Ron Holland, who I like at Ignite, but I always love the aggressive guys. When you want to talk about like different drivers of, okay, like here's a perfect example. When I watch Cody Williams at Colorado, I'm like, okay, you've got this size, you've got a little bit of this handle, and I get it. Like you're probably going to go in the lottery, but you don't really know what you're doing on a lot of these drives. You seem to be in love with this like catch on the side, slow back down, and then you take like a 17-foot turnaround and the other team should be like, awesome. Like, thank you for doing that. And then when you go to the Cody Williams tape to the Ron Holland tape, you're like, okay, I know Holland can't shoot and I know that there's turnovers. And I mean, look, some of the metrics alone, like Bazelis, when you start looking at some of the metrics for like what happened to those guys at Ignite, like there's some horrifying numbers baked into all this stuff. And I know Holland definitely has ones that'll scare you, but it's a bit like Mathurin. I even felt this way with Whitmore in the past where I'd watch Cam and I'd go, is he just going to drive by everybody every single time? I'm like, I guess he is. And some of that's actually translated in the NBA. Mathurin will not be denied. Mathurin will get to the rim, and it's up to you to like just watch because he's not going to get cut off. And Holland has some of that. I'm not comparing him directly to those guys because some of the on-ball stuff, but I really like, I love, and he's ready to go. Like when he steps on the court for somebody that young, going through the Ignite process, decommitting from Texas after Beard, there's something that it stands out in comparison to some of the other lottery guys. Cause I'm like, this guy's like ready for a fight. And I'm always going to like those guys because at least I know they care.
Yeah. I think that's like a great way to put it. He's super competitive. Right. And I really appreciate that. Like, that's why I still have him in the top 10. Like I really respect the fact that I know he's going to go 100% every single game. I know what he's going to bring me every single night, and that's valuable. Oh boy. So you mentioned like Cam Whitmore and Ben Mathurin, like both those guys were, 38 to 40% 3-point shooters, right? I just don't buy the shot with Ron at all is my issue. Like I've seen it in person. I've seen it, every 3 he's taken this year probably, and it's just inconsistent. And I don't love like the way like he gets into the shot. I think it's just like a total rewrite in terms of like how he's going to have to fix his mechanics once he gets to the league. The decision-making tree seems like kind of off, right? But you could say that about a lot of young guys. Like that's one with like Whitmore where it was like so clear, where like he just didn't have that, vision looking out. It was all, I'm going to try and put guys in the basket.
Once he had the ball was Cam Whitmore's.
100%. So that's, I think, like fixable. I hope. I think that as a guy gets older, Jaylen Brown's a great example of this, right? Like Jaylen Brown, like never looked outward once he started driving, but figured it out as he got older. The thing that disappointed me most about Ron Holland this year, and again, I say this as somebody like I'm like shitting on him and, like talking about like every part of his game that I don't like, right? I really thought he struggled on defense this year was my issue. Like was not nearly as good of a scramble defender as what you would hope for. I thought he closed out super high. I thought his technique was like terrible. Uh, and like you would see moments where he's great on the ball, like just for like if he gets a matchup, like he's going to be able to like put that guy in a real issue because he's 6'7" with a 6'11" wingspan and plays hard and is disruptive and is like super strong through his core. But again, like it was the processing again, like off the ball. It was just like, man, I want you to be better because I love watching you play. But then I look at the way that the league is going. Like I want these guys that like think through it quicker and react better and can shoot. Like he goes against like everything I want in the modern NBA right now almost, but I just respect the shit out of how hard he plays. And I can't get past that almost.
Yeah, look, that's all fair. Because when I watch some of the best defensive stuff, it's his aggressiveness, right?
Yeah.
And the problem is that same aggressiveness leads to like, what are you doing out here?
Yeah.
And by you going into the passing lane or like, cross half court, the other team wants to swing it to the other side. And like when you get that play, when you pick that one off and then it leads out to the break and you throw down this great dunk and all this stuff, it looks really, really good. But there's just the other times you're like, why are you trying to do this right now? Because you're compromising everything else that we're doing.
Yeah.
I guess there was just one play with him where there's two big guys on the other team right at the rim. The shot goes up, the ball's kind of loose, and they're both kind of expecting, oh, one of us is going to get this. And Holland just comes in from the baseline, grabs the ball right away from him, and fucking finishes. And nobody even knew. The other two guys weren't even aware of what had just happened because Holland had decided like this is. So you're at least with me on the Holland Cody Williams thing because I've seen it reversed.
I have Cody ahead of Ron, but
maybe you're where I saw it reversed.
No, like I've yo-yoed on Cody the whole year. Like it was so funny. Like I was just finalizing rankings today, really, and I was just like, well, I guess I'm moving Cody up again. I guess like it just like ended up that like Cody like slid up the board to 6, and I was like, well, do I really believe this? I don't know, but I know that like he is a worker. I know that he is somebody that I think he thinks the game at a high level. Like I do. I know that you're saying like you hated the way that he would like back down and like end up, driving and like posting these dudes and taking these like bullshit like 17 footers, right? But I thought that he actually put like real pressure on the rim in a college setting that was like very, very difficult to do so. Even though Colorado had like a very well spaced court, like it's just always difficult to put pressure on the rim. If you're 6'6" with a 7'1" wingspan in college basketball, you just naturally take up more space on the court than what these other guys do, and it's harder to drive. So I like that he put pressure on the rim. I thought that from like basically mid-January onward, after I think he broke his nose and then had the ankle stuff happen, I thought we just like didn't see the best of him. Basically, like if you go and you watch the tournament games, like compared to the games that he played in December, November, right? He just looked compromised to me at the end of the day. Like he just didn't look like the same guy in terms of first step and in terms of being able to like drive off of that ankle in any way. So maybe I'm just giving him too much credit, honestly. Like maybe I'm like giving him credit, in the face of, well, I know we didn't see the best of him because he has an excuse for why we didn't see the best of him. Whereas like some of these other guys, like they don't have the excuse necessarily. And maybe that's unfair, but I've liked the passing going back to when he was younger. I think that defensively, like he showed, some signs of being able to like play within a scheme this year, but yeah, like he was one that just like kept sliding up the board, and like I can't even I don't have a good excuse for it. Like, I can just tell you that.
Yeah, I need to go back and watch more of him because the second half of the season, I think to your point, I think there's guys that get the ball, they have the resume, and they just go, well, I guess I'm going to drive. And it's like, okay, but there has to be some hope on the drive. There has to be like some moment where you feel like, okay, this is something that could potentially work. And there's just a lot of plays, and because he's slight, and I know he'll get bigger, he gets kind of rerouted a little bit as he's on his way to the rim. Okay, I think there's somebody we left out though that we need to make sure we get to. And is that your number 2 guy right now?
No, I'd read it too. Who are you talking about?
Topich?
So I ended up with Topich a little bit lower, but uh, look, he's like the big question right now. Like I get asked the question, like, what do you think Nikola Topich's range is right now, more than anybody else by NBA teams? Because nobody has a real great feel for it. It feels like after he has a partially torn ACL. For people who don't know, 6'6" point guard, can really pass and play make. Played for Mega, the prospect factory over in Serbia to start the year, and then decided he's owned, his rights are owned, not he's owned, originally by Red Star, which is this EuroLeague power over in Serbia, and he decided to go back there for the rest of his season in January, and he sprained his knee after like 4 games, came back, played like 4 more games, and ended up partially tearing his ACL. So it's a complicated conversation with him. I almost don't care that he's like a write-off for a year. My issue is that this was a guy that was kind of like off the radar a little bit coming into the year, and we're really all basing having him as like a top 3, top 5, top 7 guy, wherever you have him, off of like a 13-game sample with Mega. When if you look at like what happened with Nikola Jurisic, who I would bet is definitely a Russillo guy based off of what I know about you, if you watch him, Jurisic came in and averaged like 18 points and had like a 59 true shooting percentage after Topic went out. So I think like part of it can be attributed to the scheme a little bit, but then he does stuff as a passer and playmaker where he's like clearly manipulating like old men in the Adriatic League. And it's just like, well, this is super impressive, but then he's like 6'6" with a 6'6" wingspan. I ended up with him at 13. Like I just don't feel super confident one way or another about him because the sample is just too small.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you've dropped him quite a bit then from where you were at in May.
Yeah, well, on the mock, yeah, I think I had him at like 6 on the board, but I've dropped him a good amount. Yeah. Okay. I just never got comfortable with the sample size was my issue.
I want to finish with Bronny James. Now, this is going to seem like unfair because we're comparing Bronny to lottery picks. We're not. We're just adding in the highlight headline like any show would of like, okay, let's talk about Bronny James. So I did a deep dive this week, and I can't believe we're even doing this. There's almost nothing that stands out. You forget he's on the floor in college.
Yeah.
The shooting numbers are not good. A cool screen here or there. I think he's a really engaged, like half court guy. There'll be a nice pass here or there. But the idea that a team is going to spend a first round pick on this kind of player makes zero sense to me. And it would have to simply be they want to do Clutch the favor or be able to say that like Clutch was able to get Bronny James drafted in the first round, because we would never, ever talk about a player that plays like him at his size without the shooting. There's no good numbers. There's just like, I looked at all the catch and shoot stuff and like, you just go, what am I supposed to do with this? And if people can take this however they want, but like we're talking about draft prospects, the good and the bad. And if we went 60 players deep, Sam and I would have all sorts of players that we couldn't stand. But now after I've done the real like digging in and watching him play, no NBA team would be drafting a 6'2" glue guy that put up no numbers in college in the first round. But somehow we're going to debate this.
Well, I can tell, even go more baseline than that. Like you're bringing up like catch and shoot numbers and all this stuff. I've done, a dive back to like 2008 or so. And I believe that Bronny would be the only one and done like ever drafted point blank that is 6'1" that averaged under 5 points per game. Like it's just like an uncommonly small, player that didn't have production that's in the draft. And look, I would be staggered if somebody used a first round pick on him. I don't think that's going to happen for what it's worth. I guess Phoenix has had him in for a workout and Maybe they're going to have him in for a second one, but like, I can't. I can't see it, honestly. I think that this is just setting up every step of the way. Like Rich Paul went on that interview tour, talked to Chris Haynes, talked to Woj and the folks at ESPN, right? And strategically, everything that he did there, in my opinion, and like I don't say this having talked to Rich Paul, like this is just my opinion on like the strategy of the whole situation. Everything that he did there was, in my opinion, in a goal to get him to fall to a certain spot, which my guess is 55 to the Lakers, right? Saying that he won't do a two-way, saying that he's going to be very specific with where he goes to work out, right? Turns down a bunch of workouts from teams. To me, that's just how you set it up for somebody to drop to a certain level, to where he's able to end up in the situation that he wants to end up in. I don't have Bronny James in my top 70. I don't. I'm with you. I don't see it. Like I have Riley Minix from Morehead State ahead of him, right? Who's like a 23-year-old kid that played 4 years at Nova Southeast or Southeastern, not Nova Southeastern, Southeastern, at the NAIA level, right? So I don't get it. I'm with you. I can't believe that we're doing this on some level. I can't believe that we're doing the media tour. And look, like I'm not going to lie to you, like I'm guilty of it on some level. I've been asked to write like a bunch of stories on it, and the stories click, like undeniably. The stories do incredibly well because he is somebody people are curious about, like in a real way. And I think that they're curious because of the leverage piece of it with LeBron. Obviously, this summer is a free agent, and they're curious because of the father-son dynamic and everything. But look, he is a 6'1" player. This is kind of what it comes down to for me. He's a 6'1" player that like I don't think can dribble well. Like everyone's like, oh yeah, he can be like this 3-and-D player. Do you know how fucking good Avery Bradley was at basketball? He was like a top 5 recruit in the country and averaged like 10 points a game at Texas, was all freshman that year, and was like incredible defensively. Like Bronny James is a good defensive basketball player as a freshman and as a teenager. He's not like Avery Bradley, who was like the best on-ball defender in college basketball that year. Like it's, yeah. Like I, in my opinion, it would have been better for Bronny James. Like the best thing that was suggested to me by people around, like let's say the basketball world, was Bronny should go back to college, go to Duquesne and transfer where Drew Joyce is there. Drew Joyce obviously played with LeBron in high school, just got the job from Keith Dambrot, who coached LeBron in high school. That's a place where like if you needed a trust factor, if you feel like, USC didn't go well, I can't imagine them not trusting Drew Joyce to like really take care of Bronny and just letting him develop. Like, guys are so good in the NBA. Like it's silly, but like I went through this earlier with somebody. Do you remember how good Tony Allen was in college?
Oh yeah.
Tony Allen won the Big 12 Player of the Year. He won the Big 12 tournament MVP. He was the best player on a 31-4 Final Four team at Oklahoma State that beat the Jameer Nelson, Delonte West team that like everybody loved. And like this guy ended up being like a defensive specialist in the NBA.
Yeah, he was the D without the 3.
Yeah.
And it was funny because the Celtics like tried him at point guard for a little while. I remember that. I was like, wait. I don't know about this deal. Look, I think it's all fair. You're talking about players and whether or not we think they can be guys. And the more I dug into it, I just was watching it going like, there's no player that's ever played like this that put up such little production. And then when you look at like the catch and shoot points per shot, and you look at like the guarded catch and shoot points per shot, and you just go,
yeah,
this is, I actually feel bad for him. I feel bad because if he is drafted to a team that is not connected to his father in that first year, it's going to be fans that are really excited about it, and they're just going to be like, well, they're going to have a weird set of expectations on him.
Well, and like I've seen too, like idea of, oh no, like he'll help like juice the G League team. Like he'll help, get us like merchandising things. Okay, like maybe they might sell like G League jerseys of Bronny James, but like nobody. Here's the thing. So like let's say that you get better TV ratings. You're not actually selling like the, TV, nobody, no advertisers are going to, and no providers are going to take G League games because Bronny James is there without like a proof of concept. And the problem there is that, okay, let's say Bronny is good, right? And he becomes a show for the G League. He's just going to get called up. And let's say that he's bad, nobody's going to care if he's bad. So it's like at USC this year, like USC, I think that their average attendance was like 65% this year or something while Bronny was there. Like it wasn't very good. Like it's any of the like marketing things I've seen, like I just think that they fall apart on any sort of closer scrutiny. No, yeah, like to me, it's all about like you mentioned, like feeling bad for them. It's all about the kids and like all about just like making sure these kids like get developed in the right way. And I truly think that like the best circumstance for him would have just been like going to a smaller school and becoming more comfortable just handling the ball and being a better on ball player.
When's the newest mock out? You just out today? You're saying?
I don't. Whenever it gets edited, today or tomorrow, I would hope. Yeah, because what is this? Is this going live Thursday?
Live Thursday.
So yeah, hopefully Thursday it'll be out, and then the full draft guide will be out on Thursday or Friday. Is the idea. So you guys will have a lot of words from me over the course of the next little while.
Looking forward to it. You can check out Sam's work on The Athletic, as I do religiously. Sam Vecenie, thanks, man.
Yeah, of course, anytime.